Leading Britain's conversation, The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, yesterday, Dominic Raab was telling us the government is serious. They really are getting ready for a no-deal Brexit. This is what he said in the House of Commons.
Our approach acknowledges that there are some risks to a no-deal scenario and demonstrates that we are taking the action to avoid, to minimise and to mitigate these potential risks so we are equipped to manage any short-term disruption. And while it's not what we want, a no-deal scenario would bring some countervailing opportunities. But this House and the British people can rest assured that the UK will be ready for Brexit, deal or no deal, and prepared, whatever the outcome, so that this country goes from strength to strength, and I commend this statement to the House.
Well, following on from what Dominic Raab said yesterday, a government official was photographed today carrying a paper. And the headline on it was, Operation Yellowhammer, No Deal Contingency Planning. This all comes from the Civil Contingencies Secretariat. They sit within the Cabinet Office and they're responsible for emergency planning. So they deal with things like flu pandemics, or they get ready and active in the wake of disasters like Grenfell Tower. And not just a senior official, but Treasury Minister John Glenn was seen leaving a meeting in Downing Street in which he appears to be holding a similar looking document. Now, if you don't want the press to know what you're carrying, it's quite easy really. You just put something in an envelope. I think they were very happy, the government, for everyone to think that Operation Yellowhammer is real and that they are preparing for a no-deal Brexit. I have to say, do I think they're serious in what they're doing? Do I think they really are going to push us down a route of a no-deal Brexit? Well, look, I've got no fears. I'm a great believer. We should say, right, let's have a Canada-style trade deal. You've been saying for 20 years you'd do this if we left. But I do not believe there are any circumstances in which Mrs May would recommend a WTO-style deal. I don't believe them. Boris, of course, earlier this week said he felt the deal was already preordained. I think they will use Operation Yellowhammer to frighten us, to say, look how bad it could be if we leave with no deal. And then, of course, at the last minute, come up with a deal and say, look, what a great job we've done. And why now? Why is all this happening now? Well, I'll tell you why it's happening now. It's happening because of the Conservative Party conference. It's happening because Boris is about to make some speeches. Boris will be very active at that Tory party conference. He's now very much got Jacob Rees-Mogg behind him, and there is a plan to get rid of Mrs May. And I think this is really more about her surviving beyond the Conservative conference than any serious message to Monsieur Barnier that unless he bucks his ideas up, we're off. That's what I think, but tell me, what do you think? Do you think the government is serious in their preparations for a no-deal Brexit? And if you think, yep, of course they are. Look, they're even producing papers. Then call me on 0345 6060 973. Or maybe you think, actually, Nigel, you're right. They just want to use this document to scare us and make us accept whatever ultimate surrender Mrs May agrees to. In that case, you can text to 84850. Or maybe you think, actually, the real message here is they don't actually want to leave at all. In which case, tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And, of course, watch us on Facebook. Comment there too. And this morning, I'm in Sydney before I head back home. On Twitter, I seem to recall that at the start of all of this, someone came out of a meeting carrying a document that had "cake and eat it" written on it. That never came to much either, says Dave. Dave, as I say, if you're walking out of Downing Street, why on earth would you carry a paper with a name written on it if you didn't actually want the press to see? Unless, of course, you are completely and wholly incompetent at every level, which is, I think, with this administration, always possible. Let's go over to Adam in Westminster, my first caller of the evening. Adam, good evening to you.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I am well. So do you think Mrs May is really, really getting ready for a no-deal Brexit?
Nigel, the government have more chance of abolishing income tax than preparing for a no-deal Brexit, and you alluded to it quite succinctly and articulately in your opening gambit. This government is beyond a joke. And as you've rightly just said, what they're going to do by supposedly preparing for a no-deal Brexit at the very last minute, what you've just said, they'll say, well, look what we've done, we've got a great deal, when actually it won't be worth vomiting in those bags you get on the airplane. It's just a joke.
Adam, you're surely not saying that you think that the Prime Minister is behaving dishonestly with us, are you?
Well, it's all smoke and mirrors, Nigel, and as you well know, being in the cut and thrust of politics for many years, this government couldn't negotiate their way round left turn if it was clearly marked. Now, what they're trying to do is, as you've just said, make everybody very, very afraid. Again, Project Fear, goodness knows what part this is now, maybe 1,000. And then at the last minute, they'll say, hey, look, we got something. Look what we did, how great it really is. Where, we've got nothing to fear by going to WTO terms, which you've advocated many, many times. And I've absolutely no fear whatsoever if this country goes down that road.
No. I guess, Adam, the one thing we could say for them is that if there is at least a bit of planning going on, it perhaps should have been happening 2 years ago, shouldn't it?
Well, it should have been happening many years ago, never mind 2 years ago. But what worries me, Nigel, the fact that they say they're planning for it, I believe is they're labouring under misapprehension. There is no such plan in place. It's all smoke and mirrors. Like you said before, they come out of these meetings with these papers under their arms, and if they don't want anybody to know what they're doing... It's ludicrous.
Ludicrous. Of course it is. Adam, thank you for your call. Adam very much takes my view. Adam from Westminster there, a cynic. Let's go to Peterborough. Speak to a new caller to this show called Robert. Good evening, Robert.
Hi, Nigel. How you doing?
I'm doing well. So, are they serious in preparing for a no-deal Brexit, or is it just to frighten us and to con us?
Well, look, I'm going to declare an interest. I'm a member of the Conservative Party, have been for a very long time, and I'm going to turn around and say, yes, I think that we are preparing for a no-deal. The point, however, and this is the crucial point, is the preparations for a no-deal should have been done before the referendum by the Cameron government, because there was a chance we would vote to leave. There was also a chance that we would not get a deal, and therefore every single possible scenario should have been prepared by the government, by the civil service. But of course, the leader of the Remain lobby, of course, was David Cameron, who didn't want us to leave and ban the civil service from any preparations whatsoever. So this
and of course, Robert, they never thought. They never thought, of course, we'd vote to leave, did they?
Well, not just him, but I think most of the political class in this country and most of the media establishment and so on and so forth didn't think that we would. But my own view is it's been on the cards for about the last 20, 25 years. I mean, for example, this notion that people are suddenly changing their minds on Brexit because of a couple of dodgy polls that have been released inside the last 2 or 3 months does not outweigh the fact that study after study after research after research for the last 20, 25 years has put a Eurosceptic majority in this country above any other country within the whole of Europe, which is one of the reasons why, well, in fact, it's the main reason why we should have had the referendum in the first place, not because the Conservative Party was hemorrhaging members to UKIP, if you don't mind me saying.
Well, no, I know, and that in the end, of course, is what pushed Cameron into that position. So, Robert, tell me, you came on and declared your interest as a member of the Conservative Party. It sounded almost like a confession. And here you are admitting that Cameron was incompetent at best in making no plans, that Mrs May has taken a couple of years to produce anything like a paper that perhaps prepares us for a no deal. When you get to the Tory party conference, Robert, do you want at the end of it to still see Mrs May as leader?
I won't be there actually this year, but I'm sticking with her for now, and we'll see what happens. Okay, and I'll leave it at that.
All right, lovely. Okay, Robert. Thank you very much indeed. No deal, no chance with this government, Nigel. It's just words, says Gordon from Minehead in Somerset. We know the PM has no care for Brexit. This is all window dressing to placate the Tory party until the conference storm passes. Chris, you're quite right to predict a storm at this Tory party conference. There are people now who seriously want to get rid of her. The trouble is if that happens, there's almost no chance of an uncontested leader coming ahead. That would mean a leadership contest that would take up a lot of time during a very, very critical period for Brexit. Barry is calling from Norwich. Barry, good evening.
Hello, good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I am well. So are they serious, Barry?
No. They haven't been serious from day one, have they? I mean, Mrs. May, she's a Remainer, isn't she? Yeah? I mean, for them to walk about with them documents on show like that, they must think we're all silly. Stupid. Yeah, it was done on purpose.
Well, I think they do think we're stupid, Barry, don't they?
When they come out of their little Westminster bubble, they actually come into the real world of the country. Yeah, right, they'll see. Yeah, Mrs. May shouldn't be there. She should have been gone a long time ago. I mean, I remember you talking last Christmas saying she won't last for the new year, and she's still here. How she's still here, I don't know. Yeah, I think if Brexit one more time, we'll vomit. Yeah,
I know it does drive people bonkers. I mean, she wouldn't still be here, in my view, if Boris had been a little bit bolder and in his resignation speech in July had called for her to go, but he didn't do it. Barry, I suppose we should give them maybe just a slight benefit of the doubt. At least at last, some planning is going on for a no-deal WTO Brexit.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we should have left days ago and just gone. I mean, these things that these Michel Barnier and all that are demanding billions and billions of euros, for us to leave, and they want this and they want that. I mean,
you're not alone, Barry.
We've given it all, but we've had nothing coming back, have we?
Not a lot. No, Barry, thank you very much indeed. And all of this debate happens as today, from the European Commission, a statement is issued that says there are positive elements to the Chequers plan. Now, the spokesman goes on to say there's a lot more to sort out. There are still problems to be ironed out, but suddenly Brussels not completely ruling out Chequers. I think Boris was right in what he wrote in the Telegraph earlier this week. There will, of course, be a deal done with the European Union, but one that'll be very, very different than that most Brexit voters thought they were going to get. I don't take this prospect of the government going for a no deal seriously at all. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive on LBC, and it's now 6:15. So a government official is photographed carrying a document entitled Operation Yellowhammer, No Deal Contingency Planning. Why do they choose Yellowhammer? It's a very, very pretty bird. The male has got an amazing yellow head, but it is an at-risk bird. Numbers have declined. It's on the danger list. Is that why they used the name Yellowhammer? Are they basically telling us that we are at risk if there's a no-deal Brexit? I think that's what they're trying to do. I think that matters more to them than scaring Monsieur Barnier about a no deal. If that had been the case, they'd have made him think that a long time ago. Now, the UN Security Council is meeting, an emergency meeting, as requested by the British. Russia has called the accusations over the Salisbury nerve agent poisonings repeated lies and unfounded. Their ambassador, Vasily Nemenyiza, told the UN Security Council meeting in New York that there are inconsistencies which are off the charts in evidence relating to the Moscow spy involvement. Let's hear him.
I'm not going to go through the list of this whole unfounded and mendacious cocktail of facts. Similar insinuations were heard from the British Prime Minister yesterday.
Well, the British representative Karen Pierce has condemned Russia, insisting it ordered 2 spies to carry out the attack.
They played dice with the lives of the people of Salisbury. They work in a parallel universe where the normal rules of international affairs are inverted.
OK, and worth mentioning at this meeting, the USA, France, Germany and Canada have agreed with the UK that the Russian government almost certainly approved the Novichok poisoning in Salisbury. So there is a bit of broad consensus emerging there. Now, look, are the government serious in preparing for a no-deal Brexit? Surely somebody out there thinks the government are being absolutely sincere. Surely somebody out there thinks that this is part of a now new, tougher negotiating strategy. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me all the callers so far have been wrong. You can do that by calling 0345 60 60 973. Debbie is calling from Leicestershire and she's a new caller to the show. Debbie, good evening.
Hi, good evening, Nigel. Nice to speak to you.
Good to speak to you. So, Debbie, do you think the government is serious about a WTO-style exit?
I want to go right back to what you quoted with the previous caller.
Yeah.
Things should have been done 2 years ago, but not just 2 years ago when the referendum was issued, and let's say by David Cameron, who I will now call a coward for bailing out with the public vote, because wasn't he supposed to support his voters either way? Now, shouldn't have all this been pre-planned? Because I am a very confused member of the public.
Well, you're not alone, Debbie, don't worry.
I was straight away after the referendum vote because, and I don't know if LBC have still got it, but after the referendum vote, I actually went on air on LBC, spoke with a presenter, can't remember his lovely name, but he said, if you think this is all over, ... And it isn't,
well,
is it?
Well, it's not, no. And that's because, Debbie, that's because, Debbie, our political class do not respect the result of the referendum. And, you know, as far as a WTO-style deal is concerned, I quite agree with you. David Cameron should have prepared for it. But equally, at no point in these negotiations has Michel Barnier thought we were serious about walking away. It's a bit late now to produce Operation Yellowhammer. Debbie, does all of this leave you feeling that maybe voting's a waste of time, or does it make you angry?
Yeah, because I made a call a couple of days ago to LBC. I don't know if they've quoted it, but I think politics and voting, I wouldn't want any child of mine going into politics now. Seriously, going to uni, doing politics, absolutely not. And is our voting a complete waste of time? But there's something I just want to say about Theresa May.
Go on quickly, please.
Yeah, regarding David Cameron bowing out, I mean, my personal opinion, it was all staged, wasn't it? That she was going to become the next Prime Minister.
Well, I don't know, Debbie. I don't really agree with that. I think if Michael Gove had stayed behind Boris Johnson, and if Boris Johnson hadn't played cricket until after the deadline when he was supposed to ring Andrea Leadsom to say that he was standing, it may have been different. Debbie, thank you. I'm going to move on. On Twitter, I get Operation Yellowhammer, named after the bird, whose song translates to a little bit of bread and no cheese. I think it was Edith Blyton that said that. Thank you for that observation. What if they're being very smart, I get by text, and want to scare the EU into thinking that we are okay with just walking away because the EU then won't get their 40 billion, and so they might come up with a better deal. Whoever sent that, look, if at the start of this negotiation, as with the start of any business negotiation, the other side understands that you are quite prepared to get up and walk away, that does tend to concentrate the minds. At no point has Barnier thought Mrs May would walk away. And certainly, all the time I've spent in Brussels, everybody thinks that's the case. Let's go to Basingstoke and speak to Simon. Good evening, Simon.
Good evening, Nigel. I think they should call it Operation Incompetence because, as you say, they should have been doing this 2 years ago.
This is what Mervyn King was saying yesterday, wasn't it? Former Governor of the Bank of England saying the whole negotiation had been incompetent.
What I would like to suggest, I would like to have a second referendum, but not a second referendum on whether we should leave or not. A second referendum on whether politicians should be held accountable personally and financially for making incompetent decisions. I would quite like to see, it's a part of the ministerial code that if you make a major failure within your role as a minister, that you are forced to resign, then if we do reach a no deal and we're not prepared for it, I would suggest that the entire cabinet would have to resign. And I would also suggest that because of the magnitude of their incompetence in not preparing for this, in not utilising the many strengths in the position of Britain has in negotiating with the EU, that they should also not receive their ministerial pensions either.
Well, time to get tough, you think, Simon. Concentrate their minds. OK, It's a strong point. Thank you. Although I have to say, folks, if politicians were held to account over their failings, almost nobody would ever go into it. Your Facebook message is coming through. David says, don't be fooled with this leaked Yellowhammer document. Pat says, I think a lot of Remainers want to leave now. Craig says, it's all theatre. And the prep work is normal prep work, but it's all being done late. Stuart said, I thought you wanted a no-deal hard Brexit. Stuart, I want us to be an independent country. I want us to make our own rules. I want us to negotiate our own trade deals, particularly with countries like here in Australia. Preferably, just for ease and convenience, we would have a simple free trade deal rather along the lines that Canada have. That would be the logical thing for them and for us. And there is considerable evidence to think that Mrs. May could have achieved that in Brussels. Oh, I know Barnier has been very difficult, but actually that is what European companies and other European governments want. But instead, what she tried to do was to put together a package that basically kept us not officially in the single market in name, but in reality, we'd be there. She's tried to keep us as close as she possibly can. Now she's in big trouble with her own party. People are lining up to kick her out at conference. And I think this is timed to say to the Tory rebels, don't worry, we are preparing for a no deal. I don't believe a word of it. Does David Ealing believe it? A new caller to this show. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for taking the call, Nigel. I don't think the government's either being sincere or actually preparing for this as a threat. I think this is a sign of desperation. And tactics from day one have been a sign of desperation. In fact, we should have prepared for this from day one and showed to you that, look, we are preparing for no deal from day one. We don't actually want a deal unless you give us what we want. EU has actually done a fantastic job. They've stuck together. They've been quite open and honest from day one that we want to give you Canada-style deal with a plus to it. No one knows what that plus means. But we've kept rejecting their deal, saying, no, we don't want this, we don't want this, we want a partnership, So from day one, we've been desperate.
Yes, ever since Florence, Theresa May has wanted this ever closer partnership. She's wanted to kind of be part of the things she wanted to be, not part of others, and the EU have had enough of it. You could, in some ways, sympathise with the EU's position. Dave, thank you for your call. Hardly any of you out there think the government has either done a good job or that they're sincere with Operation Yellowhammer. I certainly don't. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive in LBC. It is now 6:30 in time. Is the government serious in its preparations for a no-deal Brexit? So far, hardly any of you think they are. And a bit of breaking news in the course of the last few minutes. A planned tax cut for 2.7 million self-employed workers has just been scrapped by the government. It said Class 2 national insurance contributions would not now be abolished in this parliament. It cited concerns that low-earning self-employed people would end up paying more to access the state pension, and it would make the tax system more complex. The Federation of Small Businesses said that this was extremely disappointing and flies in the face of tax simplification. If you're self-employed out there, do not expect this government to do anything for you ever, other than they'll just keep piling rules and bureaucracy on you. All our governments care about now are the big corporate businesses. And I speak as somebody who ran his own business for many, many years. Now, over in Washington, more drama as the New York Times publish an anonymous article by someone they say is a senior official within the administration. The argument is that within the administration, there are people who are working diligently from within to frustrate parts of Trump's agenda and his worst inclinations. The president continues to act in a manner that is detrimental to the health of our republic, so the anonymous author says. He goes on to say Trump's impulses are generally anti-trade and anti-democratic, and he says the president's leadership style is impetuous and adversarial. Well, of course it is. It's Donald Trump. It was never going to be business as usual. Trump has hit back.
If the failing New York Times has an anonymous editorial, can you believe it? Anonymous, meaning gutless, a gutless editorial. We're doing a great job. The poll numbers are through the roof. Our poll numbers are great. And guess what? Nobody is going to come close to beating me.
And so now it's a whodunit. Mike Pence saying it wasn't him or his office, or the Vice President, ruling himself out. And here was Secretary of State Mike Pompeo earlier on today.
They should not well have chosen to take a disgruntled, deceptive, bad actor's word for anything and put it in their newspaper. And I'll answer your other question directly, because I know someone will say, gosh, you didn't answer the question. It's not mine.
It was not me, Gov, says Mike Pompeo and says Mike Pence. And Trump's difficulties never, ever seem to go away. There are people within the administration who've been in Washington, D.C. for their working lives who do not get on with this president's style. That doesn't surprise me at all. On text I get, Operation Yellowhammer, are they taking the mick? How about carry on matron, says Chris. Let's go to Bermondsey and talk to David, a new caller to this show. Good evening, David.
Hi, Nigel, yes. I just want to speak about the negotiations.
Yeah, do.
Yeah, I don't know how we can negotiate. We have left the club a bit like leaving the gym. We can't go back and say, well, can we just use the swimming pool? Because Europe have to look after their own members.
Yes, I mean, Theresa May, as I say, in her Florence speech, basically laid out that even though we were leaving, she wanted us to stay actively involved with all of the agencies of the European Union. It's a pretty illogical position, David, isn't it?
It's all very confusing to me, Nigel, but I just don't see how we can negotiate if we are out. I don't get it.
Well, the one thing we can negotiate is a simple trade-free deal. As I've been mentioning the last couple of days, for the last 20 years, I've heard people over there say that it's possible. Canada just managed to sign one, and that's all she should be doing. Going for a free trade deal, but not, absolutely not, keeping us closely linked. Why on earth are the 3rd Battalion, the Parachute Regiment, in Bosnia-Herzegovina right now wearing European Union flags on their sleeves? So it really is. No wonder you're confused, David. I think we all are.
Nigel, I really do. To me, I think you're very glib, though. You expect the government to make deals very quickly, but I think they take a lot longer.
Well, it took them 9 months to trigger Article 50, David. We're now very advanced in this process. Only 7 months to go until under Article 50 we leave. And only now, David, only now do we see something that purports to be a document on how we withdraw, on how we leave without a deal, called Operation Yellowhammer. David, I tell you what, David, if this was a private company, this would have been sorted out a hell of a long time ago, in my view.
Can I say one more thing, please, Nigel?
Of course, of course.
If it had been easy, I don't understand why David Cameron let us make the decision anyway. It's now become so difficult. Why were we given the choice?
Because politically, David Cameron was hemorrhaging not just votes to UKIP, but the rumour was there were going to be large-scale defections in the House of Commons from sitting MPs to UKIP. He was terrified of that happening, and the only way he thought he could buy the electorate off, me off, and his own rebellious backbenchers off was to promise a referendum if they won the next election. That, David, is exactly why it happened. But do you object, David? Do you object to being asked to make big decisions in referendums?
Well, I did vote, but the truth be told, I was very ignorant about Europe. I made the decision to stay in. It's not perfect, but I think like a lot of people, we really didn't know what we were voting for.
Well, you could argue, David, at every general election, if you vote Tory or Labour, who's read the whole manifesto? Almost no one. But, David, I do understand your confusion. I thank you very much indeed for your call. By text, I don't think Mrs May has the guts to tell the EU we are prepared to walk away without a deal. The UK must look an absolute joker to the rest of the world, says Vince in Exeter. And, Vince, we do, because, shortly after Brexit, a couple of dozen countries around the world were queuing up to say, can we sit down and start talking about trade? Now, because of the time all of this is taking and the desire the Prime Minister has for another at least 20 months on top with transition, the real message to the rest of the world is it'll be at least 5 years from Brexit before we can sign a trade deal with you. We are looking like jokers. On Twitter, Brexiteers living in fantasy land refuse to face reality that life outside the EU will be worse than inside. Everything against their promises is dismissed as Project Fear, even when this is backed up by proper research. Boris is bonkers and has no plan. Duncan, you may think we'll financially be worse off outside the EU, but what price freedom? What price democracy? What price being in control of our own country? This was a vote. Brexit was a vote that wasn't about whether we might be a couple of pips up or down on GDP. It was about becoming an independent country and leaving the European Union and Mrs. May, its associated agencies too. Elaine is on the line from Peterborough. Hi, Elaine.
Good morning. Sorry. Well, I suppose it is good morning to you if you're down under.
Yeah, it's 3:42 here in Sydney, but hey.
Right. Okay. Well, first of all, I'm one of the people who voted in 1975 to stay in a trading organisation. Yep. I have been duped. In 2016, I voted to leave. I have been called a cheat, a liar, all sorts of things. First of all, I don't think that Mrs. May is the right person to be handling these negotiations. I think somebody who voted leave should be. I don't care who it is. I just think, look at her record in the Home Office. It was abysmal.
Awful.
She's abysmal. She's not Margaret Thatcher. I don't vote Tory, but she's not Margaret Thatcher. Why can't we have a WTO?
And Elaine, you raise a really important point, because the one thing we constantly get from the Remainers is we weren't told the truth. It was all lies. Boris's figure on the side of the bus wasn't right. The greatest lie was in 1975 that was told by the main party leaders who reassured us, Elaine, that the common market was about being friends with our neighbours and about trade. It was one of the most gigantic lies, Elaine, ever put upon this country.
It was, and I voted for it, and I'm absolutely livid and furious. If we don't leave now, we will never leave, because the establishment will make sure we don't. And I'm livid about it.
Elaine, when you talk to your friends and family in Peterborough, do other people feel as you do about this?
Yes, they do. They think, that, we haven't been told the truth. You see, what angers me is they think that people like the establishment. I won't mention names in case I transgress or get into trouble, because you never quite know these days. But I've heard people say that people like me don't know what I'm talking about. We're idiots. We're older people. I've been told that really. The day after the vote, we were told, people like me were told we shouldn't be alive because which upset me greatly, that we didn't know what we were talking about.
I know, we are thick, we are stupid, and how dare we, Elaine, exercise our democratic rights and expect it to be carried out by this government. Elaine, lots of passion there. Thank you. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive on LBC. It's now 6:45. Well, not only are the EU withdrawal negotiations tough and lengthy and difficult for many of us to have much confidence in, but remember last week we covered scallop wars. Do you remember? 5 British boats surrounded by about 35 French boats, rocks being thrown, very, very ugly. Well, negotiations are going on between us and the French, and a resolution is expected to be arrived at tomorrow. The deal will be that no UK vessel will fish for scallops in the Bay of Seine during the period when the French are not allowed to catch. The French have their own bylaw, and they don't fish between the middle of May and the end of September. So basically what we've done is we've decided to voluntarily stop fishing for scallops in the area. And French industry fishing representative Pascal Coquet says it was a good deal. And he's right. A very good deal for the French. Well done, Mrs. May. Another signal disaster. tough to have confidence in this leader, and not many of you seem to. Please tell me I'm wrong. Please tell me I've got it all wrong. Tell me that Operation Yellowhammer shows that actually Monsieur Barnier is now taking us seriously in Brussels and that we are getting ready for a no-deal WTO-style Brexit. Call 0345 6060 973. Tell me I've got everything completely wrong. Liz on Facebook says we should have walked on June the 24th, 2016 and then started to negotiate. Karen said, let's not negotiate. Let's get out with no deal and then we can talk on an equal level. I remember a cartoon once of a fishing net, and there was a fish inside the net talking to a fish outside the net, saying, the one inside saying to the one outside, I generally find it's better to negotiate from within. And that's kind of where we are, isn't it? Trapped inside the net and going nowhere pretty fast, other than making concession after concession, including that we're happy to pay £40 billion, apparently, Luke says. EU trade plus 40 billion. This is not free trade. The Canadians have not paid for their free trade deal. The Canadians will not have open door migration between them and the European Union. The Canadians will not have the European Court of Justice ruling over their country. Isn't that pretty much exactly what Brexit voters would want? Isn't that what the referendum was fought on? I thought it was. Perhaps I'm wrong. Steve in West Sussex is a new caller to this show. Good evening, Steve.
Evening, Nigel.
Thanks for calling. So what do you make of it? Are they now serious about a no-deal Brexit, Steve?
No, because if they were serious, the moment 17.4 million people took the vote and voted for us to leave, the government should have stepped back and said to the EU, that's it, we're out. That would have put us in control of negotiations. We could have asked for anything we wanted, and it would have gained us a huge amount of respect from the rest of the countries in the EU.
Well, we were bound, Steve. I mean, the one slight problem here is that we were bound under the Lisbon Treaty to go through the Article 50 process, although that Lisbon Treaty, of course, was never really put to the people because all the parties agreed to it. Steve, I don't think we could have done quite the way that you've put it, but what we could have done, I think, is to trigger Article 50 very quickly and to say, look, we will respect the rules of this treaty if you're going to show us that you're going to play fair, and we're all going to aim to get this done within 2 years. And that, Steve, is the moment at which I would have walked. I wouldn't have walked on day one. How, as a Brexit voter, Steve, how annoyed are you with Mrs May?
I'm totally. Basically, the ballot paper said quite clearly, leave or remain. It did not give any concessions. Let's give them away our money. Let's give them this. Let's give them that. Basically, it said leave or remain. Now, at the end of the day, the people voted to leave.
And the politicians don't want to do it, Steve, do they?
Any otherwise would be to betray the people's democratic rights.
And if they do betray us, ultimately, Steve, I hope it doesn't happen, very much indeed, and I'm going to do my best, Steve. I'm going back on the road, and in fact, today it's been announced that former Brexit Secretary David Davis and Kate Hoey, Leave-backing Labour MP, will be sharing a platform with me in Bolton on the 22nd of September. So there is, at last, a coming together of people from across political parties to campaign for the Brexit, that we really, really believe we were getting. But Steve, what would happen if we were betrayed? How would people like you in West Sussex react?
Very angrily. Very, very angrily.
Very angrily.
What I don't think a lot of people understand, especially Remainers, is that if the government betrays the democratic people's vote and their rights, it doesn't just affect the Brexiteers, the 17.4 million people who voted out. It affects the Remainers as well.
No, it's a fair point. Steve, thank you for the call on Twitter. The government need to get their act together and stand up to the EU. They are making us look weak and making us a laughingstock. Also, those weak-kneed Ramonas need to get a grip and live with it, says Steve. OK, Steve. Hi, Nigel. People's hopes are being watered down by Mrs May ignoring their wishes. Fear caused me to vote Remain. But now all the EU bullying has changed my view to leave by any means, says John from Colindale. Let's go to Sunderland and speak to Gail, a new caller to this show. And of course, Gail, it was the Sunderland result that really shocked everybody on the night, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And I'm actually not from Sunderland, but I actually live here, and I've lived here for about a good 10 years.
Okay.
And I don't actually think everybody should have been given the vote, because I think a lot of people didn't understand what they were voting for. I think they just, people were disheartened with the government and what was going on. They haven't got much money in their pockets, and it was a bit of a protest vote. And a lot
Do you think, Gail, when people voted for Tony Blair, they knew exactly what they were going to get?
No, but an election is getting people in and out of government. A lot of to really understand about Europe, you need to be able to understand a bit of economics and that sort of stuff. And a lot of people don't. They're just fed up with their lives and not having much money. And so a lot of it was a protest vote.
Well, it may have been. Some of it may have been, Gail, but you could argue that every election perhaps gets used as a vehicle for protest. Gail, we had a referendum. We've had a result. Our politicians are very reluctant to enact it. Would you be completely opposed now to a second referendum?
To be fair, I don't really know.
No, fair enough. All right. Gail, I'm going to move on. Time is very tight. I've got time for one last quick caller. It's Edward from Anglesey, a new caller to this show. Welcome, Edward.
Hello, Nigel. Nice to speak to you. I've never rung LBC, but it's fascinating to talk to you. I've been told that I have to say to you what I think about no deal, and I have to say to you, I think no deal would be a complete disaster. But what I'm really asking about is that all you supporters of Brexit have so many times told us how easy the deal would be to do, and yet now that it's appearing not easy, you are not coming up with any kind of deal that is easy. I mean, you said in 16, Brexit is easy. We have...
Of course it is. Of course it is. Edward...
Fishing waters, and our companies are not subject to EU law through the single market.
Absolutely.
What we do now is it's clearly not working quite
Get a government that believes in it. Get a government that actually carries out the will of the people. Get a government that goes to Barnier and says, look, I'm sorry, we've wasted everybody's time for the last 2 years. Let's go for a Canada-style trade deal. It's very much in your interest, as it is ours. If you're not prepared to do that, we're off on the 29th of March and we'll trade, as most of the world does, on WTO rules. Edward, call again. I'd love to have spent longer with you. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'll be back in London on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. At 10 tonight, it's Tom Swarbrick. But up next, it's Ian Dale.
Nigel, thank you very much. Well.